isolated sector of our solar system, suspended in orbit around the sixth planet from our sun, lies a distant outpost, a technologically perfect world where mistakes are impossible, because the impossible is unthinkable. It is called Saturn III.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Pod Stallions. I am Brian, and with me to my left is Jason.
Hello, everyone.
And we are joined by former editor of Famous Monsters, director of the documentary In Search of Darkness, and the upcoming In Search of Tomorrow, and resident reigning champion third chair member of Pod Stallions, Mr. David Weiner. Welcome, David.
Happy to be the third party at least once a year.
You've become the Buck Henry of our show.
Yes.
So
rest in peace.
We are doing an episode that, strangely enough, I have been looking forward to for months since it was floated, and that is a deep dive and discussion into the classic movie Saturn III. And that's the first point I want to make about Saturn III is it's not celebrated. There's no real fan base. There's no there's never been a bootleg art figure of Hector. It's just sort of like one of those 80s movies that nobody really talks about that much. And I have a theory as to the why, but like the 80s are big right now, obviously. You're working on a documentary about 80s sci-fi. Mm-hmm. And this is not going to be the one that brings people into it. There's so much celebrated in 80s sci-fi. This is not really considered like an underrated classic. There doesn't seem to be a cult fan base with it. But I find it fascinating, and I think you guys do as well, because I've watched it many times.
I'm going to jump in and give my 2 cents, and then throw it to David, because I think David knows this thing the best. My 2 cents is, to me, this is like one of those a stopgap in that 77 to like 82, 83 sci-fi wave, kind of like you had the sword and sorcery stuff in the 80s, the early 80s. There was a lot of it. Ground Zero is like Conan the Barbarian, and then people think about the Beastmaster or think about whatever. By the time you get to your Hunter of the Future or whatever, that pool gets.
Do not badmouth Metal Storm. I will lose my mind.
Well, here's what I was going to say. With the sci-fi stuff, you've got levels of it, and I think that Saturn III falls into the Battle Beyond the Stars, Metal Storm, the Adventures of Destruction of Jared Sin, Space Hunter, and the Forbidden Zone. They're known. Like people know of them, but. No, there's not a lot of Peter Strauss custom action figures being made and whatever. So I think it's sort of on that lower tier of, I hate to use the term scraping the barrel, because what's interesting about Saturn III to me, and David, I'm going to hand this to you because I'm sure you know much more about this than I do. What little I know about it was going to be one thing, and I think it was produced by Sir Lou Grade, who did all the series like The Professionals and
UFO.
The Saints and UFO and all that stuff. It was going to be a much bigger thing than it was, and then somehow it wasn't, and the budget got cut, and I think directors moved around and stuff, and the whole thing went kind of bonkers. So I'm interested in it, and I think it's interesting on the level of, as you're watching it and you realize who's involved with it and the names involved with it and stuff, that you're going, this is this is great. Like, how did this happen? How did this thing, and what did they think it was going to be? And then I know that what's his name wrote a book.
Oh yeah, you know about that. I thought I was making a big discovery. Money.
Money about the experience of the debacle of making Saturn 3.
Saturn 3 inspired a novel.
Kingsley Amis.
And it didn't have. Yeah, it's called Money. I can't remember who wrote it.
But it's either Kingsley Amis or Martin Amis, the son, or whatever it is. But there's a character in that novel that is this egotistical, slightly older matinee idol type guy in this ridiculous, sci-fi, picture, whatever. And it's so that has become like an interesting footnote to it too.
Yeah, that character's name was Lauren Guyland.
Guylander,
was always taking his clothes off.
Yeah, and his virility, right?
My curiosity about Saturn 3 is that level of like, how did this happen? What the F? This is so strange. And when you see the finished product, you go, some movies you can see the finished product and go, well, there's a really good movie in here somewhere. If somebody got their hands on it or whatever. This is not that to me. This is like, it would take a hell of a lot. So, David, you tell us now what the history is, what this thing is, what the hell happened.
Well, I think I'll approach this from a standpoint of why. Why Saturn 3? Why do we care? Why are we devoting a podcast to this? Why are we even talking about this? Why do we even think that this is worthy of spending any time talking about? And the question is a giant question mark out there. It floats over our heads. But for me, I think it has to do with the fact that this was marketed directly at me when I was a burgeoning tween becoming a teen, in love with Farrah, and obsessed with Alien, but wasn't able to see it because it was rated R. And next thing you know, on the cover of Starlog, the cover of Fangoria, on the cover of Famous Monsters. I mean, just like every single magazine that I would have gone to at the newsstand had, fantastic films. They all had Saturn 3 on there. So whoever was doing the marketing for that knew that I was the target audience, because I now was told via these magazines that this is my new obsession, and that this sort of Frankenstein robot / alien creature that was terrorizing Farrah and that old guy who played Spartacus. And they go, actually, well, to me, he was like the guy from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But that was kind of my impetus to be interested and to want to know more. And so I think my obsession with Saturn 3 pretty much starts with those elements, a pretty cool poster that implies something's there, an aesthetic, at least in the trailer, that looks very otherworldly and like the Alien production design's aesthetic. Now, apples and oranges compared to each other, radically different, and we can get into that. But those are the things that enticed me. And so, I never saw it in the theater, and I got to see it later, but I was already pre-programmed, much like Hector likes to do to some of the characters in there, to want to like this. But I didn't like it, but I wanted to like it. But my brain told me to like it. And so now it's really, it's sort of a dichotomy of, this is not a good movie, clearly, but this is tied into my adolescence.
Yeah, I like space, and I like space movies. This should be great. Why do I feel terrible about watching this?
And that's that whirlpool of what was going on at the time, where suddenly, because I think I posted something, I might have sent it to both of you, I forget, or somebody sent it to me, I don't know. But it was a convention in '76 with Charlie Lippincott and Gary Kurtz and Mark Hamill talking about this Star Wars thing. And it's fascinating to watch this as they're getting questions from the audience. And what you realize is those questions of like, in episode 47, but what he said was, those guys were there in '76 talking about, will the lasers make sounds in space when the ships fire them and stuff? And like, Kurtz and Hamill are doing their damnedest to answer these questions without giving the plot away. But there was this world that was really hungry for something. They were ready for Star Wars, and the people that were clued into it were ready for it sort of when it hit, and then everybody else sort of caught up. Well, Saturn 3 is in this weird realm of like, man, you had Close Encounters, you had Star Wars, you had Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which people think was a letdown, but it did very well. You had Alien, and everything that sort of got stamped with space or sci-fi or anything, we all were kind of hoping was going to be the next thing. And so, yeah, those magazines suddenly, I mean, David, you probably know this better than us being on the other side of it too, where those magazines, they started changing their coverage, and the covers, like you said, hit all this stuff. This to me is that weird hybrid of like, beyond all the behind the scenes shit that is mental, it was rated R, and it didn't quite know, did it want to be like an Alien type edgy adult sci-fi thing? Is it, the robot Hector is that was the selling point. That's the one selling point it had. All the artwork with this robot and what he looked like and stuff.
The understanding I have is that it would, first of all, I'm sure you guys know it's the brainchild of John Barry, who was the production designer on Star Wars.
Not to be confused with the composer.
That's right. And if you Google, you will get the composer. And it was meant not as a Star Wars knock, but an Alien knock. Lou Grade had seen the money Alien made and said, let's rip that off. And Lou Grade wasn't exactly giant classy man. And
wait, I thought it was low grade. It's
you
grade?
could.
That's a joke.
I rarely. Okay, but
nice.
He loved two things. He loved getting a big U.S. name, and he was the one who wanted Martin Landau for Space 1999, not Robert.
Right.
Jerry Anderson wanted Robert Culp.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, like, I love Space 1999 and Martin Landau, but you're like, yeah, Robert Culp would have been a kick-ass Commander Koenig, But what I understand is John Barry's version of the film would have been highly more exploitative. There would have been more nudity, more gore, and when Barry and Kirk Douglas clashed, and maybe you guys know more about that, I don't, and Stanley Donen took it over.
Mm-hmm.
I love Stanley Donen. He made my favorite film of all time, which is Bedazzled, with Dudley Moore and Peter Cook. But you look at his
resume is not a outer space adventure thriller resume.
Or horror, like he was musicals and comedies.
Mm-hmm.
That's another element that makes it so fascinating to me. That guy made this movie.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, let's get the guy who got 7 Brides for 7 Brothers and have him have a robot terrorize Farrah Fawcett. That seems like the perfect fit.
And let's make it super dreary.
And about drugs, and everybody's taking drugs.
And Greco-Roman nude wrestling.
Yeah.
And Blue Dreamers. I mean, they're talking about taking drugs like in the first 10 minutes of the Blue Dreamers and everything. It's like it wants to be this edgy adult thing, and it's such a weird. It doesn't really. It opens in an interesting way, I think.
Like, I think it's a great opening. Because I saw it on NBC as a kid, and I remember going, "What is this?" And then the credits rolled, and I was like, "Oh, I know what this is." And but
and it doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, it's really just these two people. I mean, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it's
spoil away. I think we should.
I think we can spoil.
Well, okay.
I think statute of limitations have run out.
Well, I mean, it's two people being terrorized by this lunatic that shows up, Harvey Keitel, who, of course, as everybody knows, his voice was dubbed throughout the entire
by
thing.
Roy Deutris.
I don't know the full story. If it was
his accent.
Well, he had this hardcore Brooklyn accent, and
but again, you go. It's not like he was gonna drop it for the movie. You knew he had this accent before he was. What changed? That suddenly.
Apparently, they were gonna fine tune it when in looping afterwards, and he didn't show up. He didn't want to do it, so they got the other actor.
Right. Yeah, it's. I mean, Kirk Douglas, Farrah Fawcett, Harvey Keitel. That's it. That's the cast. And then this Frankenstein robot thing. The concept. It's not even really very interesting concept about the. I mean, David, you probably know, but like they're taking bits of people's brains and stuff and putting it on this monster and making him it's more efficient worker or something. I forget how.
Yeah. He's supposed to go in and sort of help these scientists and ultimately replace one of the scientists who are these like hydroponic botanists on one of Saturn's moons. And so Harvey Keitel, who's kind of a psychopath, shows up with this robot to assemble it and kind of interferes with their lives because there's no one else on this at this station. It's just the two of them. It's just Kirk Douglas and Farrah Fawcett. So they're these lovers, and it's sort of a May-December relationship. But ultimately, what happens is, and we'll get back to the broader discussion, is that Hector, the robot, it basically has this giant test tube brain that is that is its computer. And the irony is, it's like this massive brain, but it's in the core of his torso. So he ultimately has this teeny tiny little head with two little eye sort of.
And he's apparently his design is apparently based on Da Vinci drawings. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, well, and they're talking about Hector and Troy, the Battle of Troy and so on. But what I was ultimately just going to end up explaining was that the idea is that Hector, is supposed to have a quick learning curve and understand what's going on around him using the brain and visualization and assessment of Harvey Keitel. They're interlinked. But because Harvey Keitel is a psychopath, Hector is not a Pollyanna when he sort of comes online.
And we should mention that Harvey Keitel murders his way to this position.
That's correct.
Yeah. Pretty spectacular kill, too. I
also heard that the Da Vinci estate sued the studio for its design. But yeah, so that's it. That's it. I mean, he tries seducing Farrah Fawcett. I think I forget how far the seduction goes, like how creepy he is. But then she has. When you think about, is this like the other night I rewatched Ex Machina, which I hadn't seen since it came out, and I liked it more the second time I saw it. It's a slow burn. It kind of walks you through it, and something's not right with this guy, and then they do the thing, and then everything sort of kicks off in the last 6-8 minutes of the movie. I mean, that's the big set piece, is that climax, and then to the end. Well, this movie's like, is it a slow burn? Is it like, are we waiting to get to a big explosion? Like, one of the set pieces is the attack from Hector on Farrah Fawcett, and it just seems like it's one of those. It's like watching paint dry. There's no. There's no real. You're not like on the edge of thinking, oh, is it gonna happen? It's just sort of like, this is taking a while.
Well, it's thriller. It's thriller by paint by numbers. It's sort of like if you wanted to have a thriller, but you got the guy from Singing in the Rain making this movie. This is kind of what you get. It's like, well, this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you're supposed to use sound design and camera placement and acting and screaming and camera movement to reveal the bad guy, but it all feels fabricated. It's not organic, and so ultimately, this whole movie feels like a bunch of vignettes that are sort of strung together to tell a tale.
I agree with you, and I kind of think it all, like, I really do love that analogy that this is like a Roger Corman movie not directed by someone from New Line Cinema. Like it's trying to be more than it is, and it really should have kind of stuck to what was working for it. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think part of that with that is it was going to be one thing with a big budget, and let's really make a classic here. And when that changed, I think it sort of feels like, let's just get this thing done. Let's do what we can, get this thing done, get it out. It'll make a few bucks because the sci-fi thing, whatever. It does seem half-assed.
Well, there's so much cut out of it too.
There's a whole story behind this that I
know about the stuff cut out.
Well, it's a lot of writers. This wanted to be a small production, and then when certain personalities got involved, it just got bigger and bigger, and more writers got into it, and it ultimately was a Frankenstein script where everyone had a say in the matter. And But the fact that Kirk Douglas came on so he could romp around with Farrah Fawcett, and Farrah Fawcett was in there, all of a sudden the budget ballooned to a prominent budget that it sort of changed the game.
But it did get, but didn't it get cut? Didn't the budget get cut down though? From what I understand is that it was a bigger budget than they initially, and then Lou Grade was like, I'm not that interested anymore, and he took the money and put it someplace else.
Because he was producing Raise the Titanic, which was
a money grab.
Yeah, and so it's basically like, here, this is a lavish production. Oh shit, we don't have enough money. You can still finish the film, but barely. But
Did you know that Martin Landau blamed a third series of Space 1999 not happening on Raise the Titanic?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You've met Martin Landau, of course.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, well, I read it in Starlog as a kid, so
he had choice words about these things.
This is interesting too, though. Is it with that? What is this thing? What is the tone? And I don't know where this came from. And David, I'll throw this to you, and maybe you have more. I feel like, Donen was not the first director, and there are different writers and all this stuff. But isn't there kind of like a subtext of an older man, his metaphorical and possibly physical sort of impotence with a younger woman and this other guy, that suddenly there is kind of a game being played? Because Douglas's character he's not the square-jawed, he's not swinging, throwing punches, and, he's not particularly heroic in this. There's a couple of bits, but he's kind of ineffective throughout this.
I heartily disagree. If you give it a rewatch, he's doing everything he can to be spry and jumping around and battling the robot and taking it on the chin. And doing everything he can to stand his ground to the younger Harvey Keitel, who's calling him impotent, essentially, and just saying, I'm going to take the girl with me.
Yeah.
And they ultimately battle over Farrah Fawcett, and Hector steps in because Hector is sort of jealous and sort of an extension of Harvey Keitel's character, who ultimately kind of clips Harvey Keitel's wings, both literally and figuratively, by cutting his hand off and then killing him. But
doesn't Douglas doesn't he sort of get slightly insecure about Farrah possibly being interested in this guy?
Oh yeah. There's many shots of him like eavesdropping on the conversations, even though she's not flirting back, because Harvey Keitel's character is very direct and he's really creepy. He's just like,
can I use your body? That's the first thing he says to her, I think.
Yeah, but for him. For him, it's not like a rude thing.
As a pickup line, it doesn't work as well as you'd think.
Oh.
But, can I use your?
It's only worked for me twice.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, for Harvey Keitel's character, it's not rude. It's just the way. But these guys have been away from Earth so long, it doesn't quite gel, and their social interactions are quite awkward. But
she's kind of fond of the Blue Dreamers, and Douglas isn't, and so it's kind of saying like she's still, she's the May December thing, and she's like more. I mean, right? Doesn't he kind of worried that she's taking the Blue Dreamers too much or something?
Well, no. Harvey Keitel said, just offers one up, and she wants to try it. And Kirk Douglas says, "Yeah, we can do it, but when he leaves." But then they realize he's going to be there for like a long time, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Why not now?" And then they both do it. But it seems like a cut scene or a cut circumstances, because they do it and there's really no.
Yeah,
it doesn't go anywhere.
There's a scene that's in, I think, the Psychotronic Encyclopedia film, showing Kirk Douglas stabbing Harvey Keitel in the neck with a plastic bottle, and that seems to be like it's a fantasy or a dream sequence, because nothing ever comes around. And then, of course, there's all these shots of Farrah in a really sexy space costume. I'm sure you guys have seen it, and that's
very Barbarella.
Yeah, very Barbarella. Actually, kind of goofy. That are not in the film at all. Like, there's probably if they ever do, not that they're ever going to remaster this film and throw it on Blu-ray, but there's probably a really interesting story, and I think that's what keeps me coming back. is trying to figure out what this movie wanted to be.
Well, I think they filmed a lot more material that was much more of an exploitation nature, and ultimately Stanley Donen didn't want that to be the film, and so I guess Farrah was in on some of this costume stuff where she was just like, I don't want this to be about this, I don't want this to be about the sexual element of it. But it's what we're talking about is it did not know what it wanted to be, and too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right.
Yeah.
If you watch the film and it introduces 17 different ideas, and that's why it feels like it's a bunch of vignettes, because I think they kind of piece together this sort of episodic element with the through line of, look out, Hector's going to kill us eventually if we don't get killed by this other psychopath.
Yeah.
And I also want to throw in, sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure we don't forget about the dog. The dog in this movie, because the animal does not survive.
Oh my God!
Do you remember this?
I had forgotten about the dog.
Yeah, they've got a dog. So in Alien they had Jones the cat. In this one they have, I can't remember the dog's name, but this cute little mutt who his days are numbered. And
I remember this.
And it's very much it's like if you want to compare this to any movie at all, it's much more Frankenstein than Alien or anything else. It is kind of a classic Hollywood take on things because, Frankenstein doesn't know his own strength. He's got the best of intentions, but he kills without malicious intent, that kind of stuff. He just doesn't understand.
I think it's called Frankenstein's monster, by the way. It's called
Yes. I'm talking about Victor Frankenstein. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, the dog at one point, gets destroyed, and after that everything really just kind of gets wacky from there.
But so are you saying the exploitation stuff, someone else shot some stuff before Donen got
No, it was just part of it, and it just didn't feel right with the way they ultimately wanted to release it.
Yeah, like John Barry, he didn't do any shooting, did he?
He was 2 weeks. He was 2 weeks in, and then he left. And some people say that it was because he didn't get on with Kirk Douglas.
Yeah, and then and he would have never
he
finished the film anyways, because he dropped dead on the set of Empire Strikes Back.
That's right. Yeah, he died of meningitis. It's really sad. He was 49 years old.
Okay, so he started the film, and then
it was his baby.
And then it was his baby. So then were there other versions of this? Well, I think. Wait, it is the guy who wrote the book is the guy who wrote the script, right? Mark Name, or did he come in and doctor the script? Who's the script written by?
Mark Namus wrote the script.
Okay, so he wrote.
John Barry had pitched an idea. Stanley Donen liked the idea and said, "I'll produce it." And then 2 weeks in, and then it became a bigger deal once Farrah and Kirk Douglas got on board. They built a massive set at Shepperton Studios. It was a big production, and then a bunch of script doctors came in, and they butchered it. And it's a little hazy up between that and between John Barry leaving. But Stanley Donen ultimately had to step in and finish it up.
But see, that's the thing. He said Barry came in or pitched it, and Lou Grade was like, "Yeah, let's make it," or whatever, or produced it or whatever. But what was the pitch? I mean, what is the damn?
The pitch was an alien style experience on one of the moons of Saturn. With a May-December relationship that becomes sort of a weird love triangle. That was kind of the pitch. But I guess he delivered the pitch much more convincingly than I just did, because everyone sounded great.
It's a better movie in his head than ever came out on screen, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I mean, Kirk Douglas, he just finished, I think, The Man from Stony River, or no. Some Western comedy, but he was going to take a big long break, and the script came his way, or the pitch came his way, and he said, "This sounds really great," but I think because
it's the one with Schwarzenegger, right? The one where it's called The Villain. The Villain.
Yes.
Is that the
that thing.
Has a small role in that. But he basically said, "Listen, I get to run around with Farrah Fawcett and show everybody that I'm still virile and capable and a leading man, because he's getting insecure as he's getting older. So that's why he keeps on taking off his clothes and wrestling Harvey Keitel in the nude."
Yeah, it is really. It is really like it almost looks like you're looking into his psyche a little bit at that time.
And that's what that book Money is all about. So
I'll be honest. Kirk Douglas is in better shape in that movie than I've been in my entire life. However, he, he's the one you get the skin. She's the big draw, and he ends up naked throughout half the movie. He's there like 4 scenes.
There are there is a one or two brief skin moments from Farrah, and that was ultimately the draw for me. Just going back to that,
not long enough.
The fact that it was rated R. And Farrah was in it, and the word on the schoolyard was that Farrah gets naked in this movie, so I just had to see it. But I wasn't
see everything.
But it's almost like penance. Like, yeah, there's some Farrah nudity. There's also some Kirk Douglas nudity.
Yes.
Yeah. I got good news and I got bad news.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I ever saw this movie, I was just like, oh, yeah, I finally get to see the Farrah nudity. Oh, put your clothes on, Kirk.
Yeah.
That was pretty much my experience watching this movie.
I never had a Farrah thing, so that wasn't all that important to me. But and I think the first. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I just thought of a thing. There was a period there around the time this movie came out and like Yore and stuff like that, where my brother Gino apparently was going to see movies more than I knew about. He was a character, my older brother, and like the next day he'd like toss me a Your Hunter from the Future T-shirt. I went to a thing last night and they gave me this, or something.
Do you still have that?
Fridge. And I'm like, where are you getting this stuff? What are you doing? Like, are you going to screenings or like what are you like? And then one morning he was handed. It's a decal, which I since found on eBay, but there's a Saturn III. It's like a patch. It's a round patch, but it's I'm sorry, maybe it's an iron-on. It might be an iron-on type thing.
Cool.
That they handed out to the theater as a promotional thing. I have it somewhere because I found it on eBay for like $8 or something. But he gave me that, and I remember, seeing the poster in the movie theater and wanting to go see this movie as a kid, and it was rated R. Of course, I couldn't see it, and I didn't see Alien in the theater. But I managed to get to a Beat Alton and read the heavy metal adaptation cover to cover.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
I knew
the comic book.
This thing was. Yeah.
Yeah, that comic book freaked me out, man.
Oh.
I just want to take a moment and congratulate you. We've now had 2 Your Hunter from the Future references in this podcast.
It's going to be a third.
And I know Brian is already salivating over getting that T-shirt somehow.
Yeah. I own it on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
I love your.
I was going to say, how does that get a Blu-ray release? How the frick?
Saturn 3's got a Blu-ray release. Did you guys know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it does.
No,
it has the deleted scenes from the TV series, the TV cut. And a couple other special features.
Am I gonna buy that now? Like that sounds like something I'm gonna do now. And it's like trying to put a puzzle together, and it's a puzzle that really isn't that interesting once you get it done, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of behind the scenes stuff I want to see on a DVD.
Yeah.
That kind of when you read about. Look, I'm one of those people that thinks the Island of Dr. Moreau, the Stanley, what's his name, Richard Stanley version, is it a complete and utter disaster? It's pretty close.
I love
but it's
it.
not. I went and saw it in the theater because I'm like, this is going to be nuts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Brando and all the stories, and when you start hearing about the madness on this set, where like David Thewlis replaces what's his name, shows up, and Val Kilmer, the first thing Val Kilmer says to him is, "You're going to want to get out of here. Like, go back home. You're going to want to get." I mean, and that becomes far more interesting than the movie itself because every step of that was so insane.
And I just want to say that I just saw Richard Stanley's new film, The Color from Space.
Mm-hmm.
And what a tragedy that this guy hasn't been directing for the last 20 years.
Right.
I keep hearing mixed things about it. I keep hearing that we're all excited about it. Isn't it great? Elijah Wood, produced it and stuff. And I'm hearing like, but then I'm also hearing like we're all buying into what a genius he is. And it's
well, you know what, after Mandy, Nicolas Cage and Lovecraft, there's no way you can go wrong, even if it does.
Nicolas Cage is not my favorite person. He's my wife's favorite person. She loves Rapture movies, but I have to say that he was honed in right for this film, which is, I think, a commendation of itself.
I'm dying to see. I'm dying to see it because I think his story, and that he made that movie Hardware, I think it was, before he moved. Which is a great low-budget sci-fi thing.
They're never really super cohesive, but he does have some really nice storytelling abilities, and I thought I like the Lovecraft story, and I thought he did a very good job of portraying it on the screen. But that's just me.
I'm dying to see it. I'm dying to see it.
Yeah. Sorry, getting back to Saturn 3.
Well, no, I was saying that if there was a 30-minute, as in depth as they could go, making of. That was the whole thing with Flash Gordon. Like when that whole thing happened with that documentary, and Lisa contacted me about it and stuff, and I kept saying to her, like, no one has done this. Like, no, this is a movie that people know and people love, and it's not Star Wars or whatever. But the behind the scenes story of this movie is fascinating. And I remember way back when, I'm not saying I'm responsible solely for this, but Universal called me when they knew what we were doing with the toys and said, we're thinking about re-releasing this on DVD. Can you tell us why we should, basically? And it was like, yeah, I'm happy to come in. And they weren't sure about it because it had been in moratorium. And I kept saying to them, look, this really needs some behind-the-scenes stuff. Like you don't even have to pay. Just get a budget, and I'll go around, do the interviews, and because nothing has been done for this movie. And I think what Lisa did with the Flash movie kind of finally did
Life After Flash.
Yeah.
Life After Flash. The more you hear about it, the more you go, what? And people did you know that Nicholas Rogue was attached and he was going to have Ming look like a cloud or whatever all this madness, who was going to do this? There's a three picture, plan, and it was going to go to Mars and all this stuff. Saturn 3 is one of these things that I could get obsessive about. What the F?
Oh yeah, I would love to watch the documentary, but there's no superfan that we know of.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, there's that, but sometimes you get like I remember when the Buckaroo Banzai DVD, not the Blu-ray, just kind of repeats all the stuff from the DVD. Well, when that DVD hit 15 years ago, whatever, the making of stuff is extensive. They really did a great job of finally sort of telling that story. And I would love to watch a Saturn movie because was Douglas was not the first choice for this part, right? I'm guessing, David?
I think he was. Yeah. I don't know what the first choice was, but it's not like he stepped in at a certain point. So I think they got Farrah first, and once Farrah was on board and they were trying to find the actor to portray his character, Farrah was a compelling component for Kirk Douglas to not take a vacation and get naked.
So Douglas's entire thing was, I could use a couple bucks, but Farrah, me, gonna look.
Well, Douglas was what he said. This is the funny thing is, he said he's at a place in his career where he only wants to do things that really inspire him and thrill him and stir him, and then this was the space saga that he wanted to be part of. That really stirred his brain and his loins, apparently. So
take that, Green.
I think that's the case. I think Farrah was a crucial component because he knew Farrah was huge. You have to recognize. I think for our audience pretty much knows that Farrah was a big deal back in the day. But if you lived through the era of Farrah in when she was married to Lee Majors, and then she did Charlie's Angels, and she had that iconic poster. She was in Logan's Run for a bit part. There was Farrah was a phenomenon. She was huge.
Oh, yeah.
So if she was doing a movie, anyone would be crazy not to say yes, regardless of what the movie was. And I think that was kind of the maelstrom surrounding that packaging element.
Was this before or after the movie she did called Sunburn with Charles Grodin? Was this before that or after that?
I have to look that one up. When you say burn, I always think The Burning Bed, which is when she got serious. She did Extremities, and she did The Burning Bed, playing a rape victim who gets her life back. But
that was 84.
I thought she was a battered wife in that one.
Yeah, TV movie.
Sunburn was 79.
So that was
okay.
right.
I've never heard of that.
Really yeah, it's a classic. Charles Grodin, I think it's kind of an action comedy kind of thing, and she's in a bathing suit most of it, and stuff like that. No, it's not a classic, but I remember it, and I remember it. It's like she never, as big as she was, and she, like you say, she was huge. I mean, the merchandise and the licensing and stuff. She never really broke into movies, really. I mean, she was in stuff, but she never really became a commodity, right?
Yeah, well, she essentially was a personality. She wasn't a TV star. Right. She wasn't a movie star. She was just a sort of a glamour icon. And so the fact that she was in anything, I think, was a draw in that era. But I think she by the time she did Saturn III, she was yearning to be taken seriously because she was tired of being the object of everyone's affection and being treated as such.
Right.
But the thing is, what was interesting about this movie was that when it was packaged, it was really not about Farrah. It was about this killer alien, much like Alien, this killer creature in a haunted house contained space setting. And that's what it was supposed to be. And Hector probably was supposed to sell action figures if that was something that they would do back then. But, for a rated R film, which they wouldn't, or they didn't. But
they did once.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm already thinking about the Alien Kenner doll, but I mean action figure. But what I'm ultimately getting at is this was supposed to be the Hector space movie.
Yeah.
But it became the Farrah in space gets naked with Kirk Douglas movie where there's a rampaging robot.
I mean, part of the problem is, well, just what you said, first of all. But I mean, as far as a story and everything else goes, it's like, okay, so that's the thing you're selling. Hector's on the posters, whatever. Maybe it swerved. There was going to be more Hector and less of the other thing, and then Douglas gets involved, and it's like, let's have more of this, and I'm going to show my butt again or whatever. But at the end of the day, Hector is a clunky piece of machinery. It's not like whatever that was going to be, whatever he never looks like much more than,
you're not scared.
One of those. You're not scared. It's like the choppy movement and the head kind of thing. It's never. If there was a way they could have done that more fluid, you could imagine. I mean, I'm pulling this like had there been green screen or whatever, you could have had a guy in a unitard behind.
That would have been really amazing. Yeah.
Then it would have been like, holy shit, here he comes again. But instead, it's like a wind-up toy, and so it's never particularly threatening, throughout the story either.
Well, that's the thing. It's a very cool design. I agree, and I think when you look at it through contemporary eyes, it's very clunky. It's very goofy. It just doesn't have the sophistication that we were just getting used to when after Star Wars. It's much like the Black Hole, or it's much like Logan's Run in that you have these classic old Hollywood masters doing these newer movies that are best left to sort of the young whippersnappers who can make. Yeah, and so it's their perception of how a space movie should be, and it feels old and antiquated. And their ideas of sound effects and servos and whirring things and wires and tubes doesn't fit with the new aesthetic, but they're still using it. So I would argue that when I was a kid, I found it to be incredibly intimidating and frightening. But then again, I don't have the proper perception of seeing it on the big screen as like a 12 or 13-year-old kid, because I never did. So I only have I finally get to watch it on, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember if it was VHS when I finally saw it, but, just didn't know what to make of it, but it definitely wasn't frightening.
I recently rewatched it because Ed Bishop from UFO, who's one of my favorite actors, is like fourth build. And I thought, I honestly, no way, he's not in that. He can't be in that. And I rewatched the whole thing to find out he just does, just like he does in Stanley Kubrick's 2001, he just has a voice cameo.
Aha.
He is the pilot that flies over and asks them if everything's okay.
Oh, okay.
And then they go, yeah. I can't remember how it goes now, but he's faked
really
out.
Well, that's a pivotal scene because they, like, once every 6 months, like a ship flies by to make sure everything's copacetic, and basically what happens during that scene, which is actually really kind of interesting, is they're being terrorized and they need to help to get off that rock. I think their ship is blown up at that point. But their only means of escape. And when this ship goes by, Hector interrupts and takes over the comm and uses their voices to basically say, everything's cool, everything's fine, yeah, everything's great. They're like, okay, see you in 6 months. And, it's a very sad moment for, Kirk and Farrah.
It's also not the pinnacle Ed Bishop scene I wanted to see in the film.
It is not. It is not.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is the design of this film is that beautiful ITC look.
Yeah, right.
Harvey Keitel's ship is amazing. That sort of like bug spider spaceship is just glorious at the start. Harvey Keitel and their spacesuits are very elaborately designed, and of course Keitel's is a little Darth Vader-ish. Even at the end,
he's got the black helmet, and the good guys have the white helmets.
Yeah, that's a little heavy, but even at the end, the Starliner that brings Farrah to Earth, and Earth looks like the back of a radio. It's really depressing. It's just awful. That actually looks like they took parts from Jerry Anderson's UFO. And
they did.
Yeah, they really?
They did. Okay,
because that looks like Skydiver coming at.
That is the same model piece of it.
Okay.
And there apparently, I don't know which shot specifically, but there was a shot that was used for Space 1999 that they ended up putting in the movie also.
Okay, I was going to ask about that. There is a large cruiser at one point in the film, and that really does look like first season Space 1999 ship, which I know they were reusing that footage a lot. Actually, a clip from Space 1999 appears in the New Adventures of Wonder Woman. I think it's the episode War Games. I was watching it a few years ago, and it's like, holy cow, that's Space 1999 footage being used on Wonder Woman.
There's another element to this movie that I think it's important to talk about as well, is because we always talk about the influence of Star Wars, but it's also important when you put your head back into the space of this time, this time zone of filmmaking. 2001 was incredibly influential, and that had a tremendous influence on Jerry Anderson's stuff and Space 1999 and the design aesthetic. And so while we keep on talking about Alien as the inspiration of doing this, and Frankenstein to a major degree, the thing is that you can't discount the fact that this is HAL inspired, where you basically have what's meant to be a helpful AI that ultimately gets psychopathic. And, HAL is very, very much integrated in Hector in comparison to, any other kind of villainous, antagonist.
Yeah, and Star Wars, as impactful as it was just one movie at the time. It wasn't a franchise. It wasn't a blockbuster. I don't think we really saw the true impact of Star Wars until Empire Strikes Back was a hit. And then you started seeing so many more rip-offs. But you're right. I mean, 2001 was still looming over sci-fi by 1980. People were still fooling with it.
Well, to me, it was always that. It was always, there were two camps kind of even then, because Alien was an R-rated movie, and it did very, very well. I mean, they did a lot of business. It was a huge hit movie, but it was a very different kind of thing. Kids couldn't go see it. I mean, Star Wars was popcorn, good guys, bad guys, and it was massive. I mean, I think it came out in May. I think by September, October, they were saying it's the biggest movie of all time.
But Alien was the movie like the Ramones were to bands, where filmmakers could go, I could do this. You know, like Star Wars is a hard thing to imitate. You need a lot of money. Whereas Alien, it's a horror, and it's a tightly done horror. So you can do that because on a small budget.
It's a more contained space. You can make a movie called Creature and put, classic.
Basically just remake the entire Alien.
Exactly. And then it was like, well, if it's dark enough, we could pretty much use the exact same suit.
Yeah, Tom Skerritt, we have Ferris Bueller's dad. How would that work?
It's also, but I mean, it's again that slow. I mean, Scott's whole thing was like build the tension, take its time. It's sci-fi, but it's more in the realm of, you know, the 2001 silent running. Everything is slow and takes its time, and there's not laser blasts and, you know, space pirates and things like that. So Saturn 3 is kind of like, you go like, well, it's clearly in the latter camp, or it wanted to be something significant like that. I don't think they pushed that out and thought, well, this is going to be a, you know, this is gonna be a franchise. We're gonna do, this is Star Wars, and we're gonna, because we had, you know, the black hole. I mean, I always thought, I mean, David, you got the scoop, but apparently there weren't a trilogy of movies planned. There were no sequels. There
was no sequel. There was no other side of the black hole. There was no inside of the black hole. It was just they go to the black hole, and that was the last page.
Yeah, I haven't slept since I've read that.
Yeah, anybody at the time would have thought, well, this is Disney going, we're going to do a Star Wars, and it's going to be, but, you know, everybody wanted a piece of that. But Saturn 3 clearly wanted to be a sci-fi horror or monster thing, or something edgy, or I don't know what. But I mean, the whole thing is like from the start is just like, this isn't going to work. Let me tell you why this isn't going to.
To your point. Go ahead.
Wasn't there somebody who did the score for the movie? That's a significant name too, isn't it? The score?
Elmer Bernstein, but they barely used his music.
Yeah, they cut him out, right?
Elmer Bernstein. I mean, think of this. Think of the names attached to this thing. It's a hodgepodge of madness. But if it was like, you know, you're doing a remake of, Run Silent, Run Deep or something, you know, in space, well, maybe we could. But I mean, this was like a brand new thing that wanted to be. I mean, obviously they wanted it to be a hit, but it didn't make any sense. None of it made any sense really. It would have made more sense if it was by like Tangerine Dream or something.
I really do like the idea that this is almost like movie by committee.
Yeah.
And it didn't. When they lost John Barry, I like to think they lost the one person who had the vision as to what this thing was.
Yep, I agree.
What do you think it would have been? Let's say he got to do it. What do you think this, with everything you guys know about the footage that was shot, what would it have been?
I think it was supposed to be like this old dark house in space. And I think you would have gotten a lot more nudity and a lot more gore. And
Kirk Douglas nudity?
Much more Kirk Douglas nudity.
It was never meant to be. It was never meant to be a big budget showcase. It was never meant to be a big film. It was always meant to be a small film that was
film. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Alien inspired and essentially not necessarily a knockoff, but you know, very much in the same vein after the same audience.
But it was.
I just wanted to add real quick to what Jason was saying to his point is that, you know, we also have to remember that not every movie needed to become a franchise or a series or a bunch of sequels. That wasn't the mindset for every movie that was pitched to a studio.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I don't think Alien. There was any intention with Alien. Alien was a one-off that years later people go, hey, maybe we can do more. Yeah, I totally get that, but they wanted this thing to be a hit. And as far as like the budget goes, I don't think you look at it and go, oh, it's far more ambitious than its budget allowed or something. You can tell it's a pretty. There's three characters in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tiny. It's three. It's a three-handed. It's three people. That's it.
Well, they were concerned. They were one of their biggest concerns, and it was already like too far gone. Was the fact that there were only 3 people, 4 if you count Hector, and 5 if you count the dog, I suppose. But there were only 3 people in this movie, and as a haunted house movie where people get picked off, they had a big problem because they couldn't pick everyone off. Where then you have the Nostromo, you've got a complement crew where there's more than 3 people, and so at least you've got sort of the Agatha Christie and then there were none, scenario.
So there you go. From the off, you go. So what's the thing? Well, it's this thing, and they go to space, and then this
10 little
robot.
10 little Indians.
Like, oh, okay. And then what happens? And you go, well, how many? So we're going to lose some people. We're going to have some sacrificial lambs. Like, how are we going to do this? No. We just got the 2 people.
Well, they kill the dog. That's why the dog does not survive.
Yeah, we'll kill the dog. But we got 2 people, and we're going to milk the tension with 2 people and this thing. And Hector didn't have a voice, right?
He later on does have Roy Deutriss's voice.
Right.
At the end.
I heard that
Hector.
They couldn't get Paul Lynde.
That would have been terrifying.
That would have been a great movie. I own that movie all with Hector.
They had Phyllis Diller do it, and it didn't quite work with test audiences. But actually, I think one of the most shocking elements of the movie that still resonates and it still works is that's a point, is that Hector doesn't have a voice and Hector won't speak, and Harvey Keitel is saying, why won't you speak? And all Hector is doing is calling him a killer because he knows what's going on inside his brain. But the big reveal at the end, because we're spoiling this movie, is that when he finally does get his voice, you think that it's Harvey Keitel's character, but it's really Hector using his voice, but also has removed his head and put it over his own head.
Yeah.
While he's speaking with Harvey Keitel's voice, and that is a frightening visual. It's very shocking.
That's one of the few things I think that works in the film in terms of fear, is when Hector takes over, and he's implanted chips in them, and it's just gotten nuts, and that is it just took too long to get there, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the thing with Farrah, I mean, it's a pretty visceral. I mean, I don't feel there's any really tension, but as a concept, it's a creepy, scary thing, like with the eyeball and the needle thing and all that. And it's like it's a creepy idea. It's just, again, the execution. But I think part of the design, because you look at that poster, I'll never forget seeing that poster in a movie theater. That was our. If you weren't lucky enough to see the trailer while you were in to see a movie, it's not like television was going to show you the big trailer or whatever. You saw the poster and you'd go, "Oh, what is this? I've never heard of this."
I will say Hector is a completely effective poster monster.
Absolutely.
To this day, I would be proud to put this poster on my wall.
Yeah. I mean, before you see him move and before you look at that and you go, "Whoa, what the hell's that?" And that's what's etched in my 9-year-old brain when I saw the Starlog.
Well, because even as a kid, we were aware enough of the stuff that we knew at the time, and some things we knew who Maria was from Metropolis, or we'd seen pictures of things. As a design, you looked at that thing and went, "This doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before."
Yeah.
If this is a new kind of android or robot, I've never seen anything like this. That's what was so cool. You thought, wow, this movie. So I think I finally saw it on television, like an ABC movie type thing.
NBC paid $4 million for the rights to this in advance of its release in the theater, and that's what caused it not to be such a massive bomb. And I was there, man, when they premiered that, and I watched the whole thing, and I didn't feel good after.
I did not respect myself.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, it's dreary.
NBC paid $4 million to air that before it got released.
Yeah.
They were like, we'll take it.
Yeah, in advance, Lou Grade, who was, as much as he was not an artisan, he was a good businessman.
Yeah, that was common practice.
Yeah.
For producers to work with networks where networks would pay big bucks for the network rights to things, and that would offset the budget.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I understand that. I'm saying that to me is a testament to, hey, listen, I got a space movie coming up. It's got Kirk Douglas, legend, Farrah Fawcett. And and it's outer space, and it's like this whole Star Wars shit the kids are into, and the alien. It's gonna be like that.
You got to put a cigar in your mouth when you're saying this.
Yeah, exactly. It's Spartacus and Chinese Angels in space.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that right there to me is like, oh yeah, everybody could taste this thing was going to be this big, another Alien or sci-fi. Everything is, something's gonna click or gonna catch, and there you go. I mean, that would be, and the Keitel thing is really weird too.
Yes.
If you look at Keitel, if you look at his body of work, in the, obviously everybody knows him mainly, connected to Scorsese with the, Who's That Knocking at My Door and Mean Street and Taxi Driver, etc. But by the time you get to the end of the 70s, he's working with like, what's his name? He did Blue Collar, and he did the other one, Fingers, with Toback, James Toback movie Fingers. He's doing, he did that French one about the woman who's got a camera implanted in his eye.
I've seen that. Why have I seen
that? He's picking strange stuff. I don't know how he gets on a list, even a B list. Not that people didn't know who he was, but I don't know how he gets on the B list of that's the guy you want as your heavy in this sci-fi thing.
Yeah,
it's such a strange bit of casting to me.
He's perplexing.
I disagree. I think he's got a certain pathos to him that he had also earned with his association with Scorsese. But I think the Brooklyn accent is what's weird about the whole thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Everything he did up until that point was it was a Brooklyn accent. He was.
I've always been kind of confused by the English accents in Logan's Run. As like what neighborhood are Jessica and Logan from?
Yeah, because they're well, that's why the big reveal that they're in Washington D.C. is all the more surprising.
Yeah, but like Francis doesn't have an accent.
Mm-hmm.
But they were from the British. They're like descendants of the British consulate.
Yeah, they're from like DC. London town. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly.
But I love Keitel as an actor. I was gonna
say, it's like we talked about when we were talking about Black Hole. That's a fascinating too when you think about the casting of it and how all over the place it is. And then it's like Ernest Borgnine, and you're like, well, yeah. I mean, I guess
the Black Hole always felt like they took from the Irwin Allen book.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Irwin Allen playbook.
I mean, like there's 2 cast members of the Poseidon Adventure in the Black Hole.
See, Gene Hackman was unavailable, so they got Robert Forster.
Yeah, they got Robert Forster.
Wait. Who's the other one? Wait, who's Borgnine?
Anthony Perkins.
No, Roddy McDowell.
Who was the Poseidon Adventure?
Roddy McDowell, the waiter who kills himself at the...
Oh, well, that's a trick question. That's a trick question.
No, it's not.
Come on. It is too. We're thinking on camera. On screen.
If you look on paper at the cast list, I give credit goes to Brian.
Oh my goodness, Vincent is the movie.
I believe if you look at the credits, he doesn't get listed in the credits.
That's
so it's not really Roddy McDowell.
Okay.
So I guess I win too.
All right.
Both won.
If that's important to you.
Points to Jason.
Let's not fight.
But then you think at the time too. It's like, well, shit. Poseidon Adventure was the ABC movie of the week. Every 6 months they ran that freaking movie, and he was in stuff. And so it's like, well, that kind of it makes sense. But then you go, well, Ernest Borgnine is in an outer space adventure movie.
But he doesn't get naked enough.
Well, but I think there's an element to this as well where, again, going back to this sort of classic Hollywood feel to this movie where it doesn't quite fit, and that's just the casting of Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been Burt Lancaster. It doesn't make a difference. It just feels from another era.
It feels,
and
it
it
a bit like I want to be in a space show. Like, yeah, like
exactly.
Yeah. I'm struggling to find it, but there's another one like this, where somebody's
Lauren Green in Battlestar Galactica.
A little bit. Although that
I'm thinking. You know what I'm thinking, and Brian, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about.
all right.
I'm thinking. Okay, I'm thinking of the. I think it was Corman. I think Corman produced this. Vince Edwards starring Space Raiders.
Space Raiders with Vince Edwards. That is the weirdest Han Solo I've ever seen.
It is the worst. He doesn't even look like a plumber.
No, he does look like a plumber. That's the problem.
They wouldn't let him work at the plumber's place.
He's got a pompadour.
Oh my! He's got his belt down by his knees and his guts hanging out and his hair's all up.
The other one I think is Tony Curtis did a bunch of real shit space movies in the 80s, and he's Tony Curtis. You know, like we've got to save the planet from the. You know, he can't say space words. You know.
I need more eyeliner.
Yeah, it's that kind of.
How far did you have to throw the net out to get to Vince Edwards for Space Raiders? I know it's low budget. I know there's nobody in it.
Is it wrong that I've seen Space Raiders like 10 times?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because I came across it about a year ago, and I got through 20 minutes, and I started haphazardly turning my belt into a noose as I was watching it. And, you know, like I was like, this is so bad. I mean, it's kind of charming, but it's so ridiculously bad.
I don't think it's a bad film.
Don't they recycle?
Also including Tom Christopher of
Hawk
in Buck Rogers of the 25th Century.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of.
Which one of you said I don't think it's a bad film?
That would be me. Run, David.
Okay, wait a second. This is the one where they recycle the
Battle Beyond the Stars footage. They do it brilliantly.
Russ Meyer-looking spaceship from Battle Beyond the Stars. They recycle it for this movie, right? Isn't that the one I'm thinking of?
Yeah, I also admittedly own like the collected works of Jim Wynorski, and I love them. So there you go. I mean, I'm a fan of that kind of cinema. But yeah, I like Space Raiders. It's childhood. I enjoy it. I won't defend it, but
I'm glad you found a place to draw the line.
Sometimes, you know, sometimes you can go out and have a steak, and then other times just taking a piece of ground beef and putting it on a grill, that's like the best hamburger you've ever had in your life. And
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, I'm not going to buy that hamburger meat ever again. I had it. I enjoyed it. It was a good experience.
Or you go, I want to have this hamburger meat available at all times in the deluxe format of Blu-ray. I know that doesn't make sense, but
basically, if you really enjoy steak and you want to go to a high-end steakhouse, but you are going down the video aisle and you're going basically to the Sizzler section, Roger Space knockoffs.
I talked about this on this show where the advent of Amazon Prime and then Shudder and all this stuff. And I can sit and go, put that in the queue. And shit, they got the Illustrated Man. I haven't seen that.
Because I feel like killing myself tonight.
And I'm like, looking at it, and then it's like, Space Raider. Oh, yeah, I kind of remember this movie. And then it starts up, and I'm just like, I don't know if I can get through this. There's so much other shit I need to watch, even that could be just as exploitation, just as low budget or, hokey horror or whatever. And I sort of have to go, I can't. And so I think I got about halfway. I think I got to the bar fight. The bar fight, which was like
really great.
Which made Jason of Star Command look like Fellini's satirical.
Hey, maybe Rod Steiger would have been a better choice than Kirk Douglas. I don't know.
There we go. By the way, I'm fascinated with the Illustrated Man's Mars. Or Venus up part of it, like where it's raining. Like, I have a real fixation with that.
Insane.
Yeah.
First off, the movie poster is a nude Rod Steiger from behind, covered in tattoos.
How did they keep the throngs away?
Hey, I'm looking at my wall, and I've got that poster.
Do you really?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. I am a huge
I'm
Bradbury
saying,
fan. The
I don't know how many
anecdote
people-
I've heard is that Bradbury was at the premiere, and a child came to him crying, say, "Why did you make that horrible movie, Mr. Bradbury?" I don't know if that's
Wow.
true or not, but I want to believe
Probably
that.
because they saw Rod Steiger fairly nude throughout
Yeah.
in one point. That's probably what the shock was. So I would say Vince Edwards. It's not Saturn III is not Vince Edwards casting, not even close. But it is strange that Kirk Douglas was the guy. Like who? Okay, here's a fun game, David, and Brian. David, you seem to know more about the movie a little bit. Who do you think at the time? Let's say you got Farrah Fawcett, you got Harvey Keitel. Who could you have seen in the part at the time?
For
1980.
For the Kirk Douglas role?
The Kirk Douglas role, yeah.
Well, it's funny. I mentioned Burt Lancaster as he wouldn't fit, but I could see him as well. Kirk Douglas isn't available, so let's go to Burt Lancaster. You got to think of the season. You know, I think Kirk Douglas was about 64 when he filmed that. So you need someone who is sort of his heyday was in the 50s, if not the 60s.
I got one.
You know, maybe Steve McQueen.
Damn it!
You know?
That was where I was going.
Okay.
Because he would have been about 50 at that point.
Okay, exactly. My point is, I get the feeling that the part required a slightly older male actor, and it became Kirk Douglas. I'm saying, let's say you did the May December thing. She was like 28 or whatever it was in the movie, or whatever, 30 or whatever. You could still have a McQueen. It didn't have to be someone of Douglas's ilk or his generation. And I'm thinking, who would have been a guy at that time that might have done something like this? That would have been, I don't know if Kirk Douglas is A-list in the sense that he was legendary at that point, obviously still, but I don't think his stuff was like.
I would have liked to have seen Charles Durning running around nude in that film, wrestling Harvey Keitel.
Now, here I am.
I'm a James Coco fan. So.
Okay,
or Dom DeLuise.
Wow.
You said James. You said James.
I don't know. Maybe Burt Reynolds.
No, I was going to say James Caan. I could see
Jimmy
James
Caan.
Caan having done that.
You wanted me to take this seriously? I'm sorry.
No, I'm serious. Like James Caan did Thief a year later, and Thief was a stylish, crime thriller thing. Michael Mann's first movie, whatever. I could see James Caan did Rollerball with what's his name. I could see James Caan having done this, and you wouldn't have gone like, what the fuck? You might not have shown his butt, but I mean, plus I know.
Well, Caan wasn't old enough then, and I think.
But it didn't have to be. Well, Caan would have been like 50, I think, at that point.
Well, that's another 15 years older than he needed to be. Like that was an era when the leading men were always 20 to 30 years older than the women anyway. So people were used to that. So you needed to emphasize the fact that he was older by making him even that much older. That's, I think, the concept. If they were really indeed going for a May December romance, and the fact that he has to sort of prove that he's adequate and not inadequate in all departments. If that was indeed the intention of the story, that's, I think, the casting element you had to go. But I agree. I think James Caan would have been great in that role.
Well, I think the part of the problem is that you put, as soon as you get an image of 65-year-old Kirk Douglas next to Farrah, who looked about 25, even though she was 30 or whatever, I think everybody kind of went, okay, this is, it's a strange thing to kind of, from right out the gate, you're going to expect audiences to kind of buy this and not sort of snicker at it. And that's the footnote that it's sort of become. Whenever you read any of these articles that rip it to shreds, they talk about the ridiculousness of, his age versus hers or whatever. And it's totally a vanity project, like you said, with him, wanting this part and wanting to do this and everything. But, I mean, it would have been slightly less jarring had it been someone about 10 years younger.
Mm-hmm. What about Chuck Heston?
Mm.
See, Now,
As long as he's got a kerchief, I'm down for it.
Oh yeah, me too.
Well, how old was Heston in like a Mega Man?
He was pushing 50.
He already felt really old in Earthquake, which was what, 74?
Yeah.
When he was with Geneviève Bujold, who was probably Farrah's age.
Yeah.
You know why? Because he's got the. Say what you want about Heston, but he's got those knobby knees. He runs.
Oh.
I think that.
You say he runs funny?
Should we do a whole episode on very particular run styles, like the William Shatner run?
Or Michael Caine and Get Carter just diffusing all his tough guyness.
Oh, Michael Caine, Roger Moore. Roger Moore cannot run. They would try to shoot him from the waist up because he would tear. His knees were knobby, and Heston's a little bit like that in Planet of the Apes. He's a little knobby knee. But I could maybe see Heston. Heston wouldn't have been maybe even as jarring as. What was the one Heston did around the time? It was like an Egyptian thing. I was thinking of this the other day. It was like an Egypt, like a curse of a tomb or something.
Not Phoenix.
The Awakening?
I can see
The Awakening?
That sounds right, The Awakening.
But is Heston in that?
I thought Heston
it's Sir Laurence Olivier.
I thought
Awakening does have Charlton Heston.
Oh, it does. Okay.
That's the Egyptian thing, right? It's about they disturb a tomb or something.
Right.
Because I remember that being like on the back of Starlog.
It's a female mummy.
Yeah, that's right. A mummy.
Right. A mummy. A mummy.
A mummy.
A sexy mummy.
So here's a question, Brian. In all your travels and all your encyclopedic knowledge of toys and Megos and customizers, have you ever come across custom figures from Saturn III, or did anyone make the robots?
I don't. I'm sure that in all my years of going to Chiller Theater, someone put together I would say a garage kit of Hector. There's no way that didn't happen. But I don't ever remember seeing. You know how like guys put together action figures of any 80s property that they love. I don't think there just isn't that kind of fan passion for Saturn III. It's sort of in the same boat as what I would suggest are our next topics are films like Outland or Galaxina. Like
David's a big Outland fan.
I'm a huge Outland fan. I love Outland.
Well, I don't mean to say that it isn't a good film. It's an interesting movie. It's just no one talks about it. It doesn't have that sort of appeal that like stuff with. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I agree with you. It's sort of not floating around the pop culture zeitgeist.
Yeah. No one talks about it.
As Zardoz is, but Outland definitely has its legions of fans,
but I don't want to say that they want to be in the Zardoz territory because most people are just basically saying there's Sean Connery in a big red diaper, and that's where it begins and ends.
Yeah.
I'd rather that no one talked about Outland. Outland is actually a pretty good thriller.
Yeah,
but it kind of gets ignored. You don't think about it. You don't hear about it.
Well, I have to add that I think it's just the passage of time. I mean, there was a time where I was getting nervous, literally about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because I was sort of feeling to myself, it's like that movie was huge and that was a pivotal film in my world, and it seems to be lost in the discussions of time. It just doesn't get much attention anymore.
Yeah.
And, I don't believe that it'll be lost in the sands of time because I think it's a very significant film. But in this, like the Spielberg oeuvre, people don't seem to mention it much. They skip over it. And that was a major film.
Even E.T. really doesn't have that. Like, I find The Goonies has more
legs?
More legs these days than E.T. And I find that really interesting.
Well, I got to say, I as much as I think E.T. is a fine film, and recognized what it was, I saw it once in the theater, and then I saw it years later, I think on DVD, and I thought, well, that's a good movie. I didn't mind seeing that again. It doesn't really. I mean, although I got emotional at that damn commercial, that did.
Yeah, that was something.
Yeah, shit. But I think you're right about Close Encounters. To me, Close Encounters is an infinitely more interesting, wonderful movie than E.T. Hands down. E.T. is what it is, and it does it very well. But Close Encounters is that is a masterpiece from him. And I think you're right. And it might have to do with the merchandising too. That like Close Encounters is not it doesn't have an identifiable image or character or thing that sort of has carried it through. But I think you're right. That's interesting that you say that. I've never heard someone say that, but you're right. It seems to have it seems like even when people talk about Spielberg and they go through his director of such films, Close Encounters isn't really in there.
The guy has too many home runs. So when you talk about it like one breath, what has he done? You kind of go from Jaws to Raiders to E.T. to Jurassic Park,
the big giant movie,
Schindler's List, and then you then all of a sudden it becomes a laundry list.
Before you know it, you don't have room for Hook and Always.
Yeah, I know, right?
Where's the love for 1941?
Where's 1941?
Yeah,
yes.
Duel.
1941, not a bad movie. Eddie Deason was sick recently, by the way, and I think did a fundraiser because he had to go have some surgery.
Yeah, I was sorry to hear that. I've always loved Eddie Deason.
He's doing okay though. He made it through. He had like open heart surgery or something to that effect. So
Eddie Deason is what Eddie Deason is. That is no act. That is exactly who he is. I swear to God.
Before we go completely off topic, I think it's very important to point out.
Completely on topic.
Well, I just want to bring it back to Saturn 3. I just want to bring it to Saturn 3 one last time. And just mention that Saturn 3 was nominated for 3 Razzie Awards.
Yeah.
For Worst Picture, Worst Actor, Kirk Douglas, and Worst Actress, Farrah Fawcett. And I don't understand why Hector wasn't nominated, but he was not.
You got to wonder what Harvey Keitel was thinking. Like he was just probably like, phew.
Yeah, he probably knew.
I got to wonder what Harvey Keitel was thinking when he saw the finished film and went, who's that? What happened to my voice?
Well, I know, putting Roy Dotrice's voice on Harvey Keitel, that's not even, like, the guy who's doing Flash Gordon's voice, very well done. Because he's trying to do a Sam
Jones. I believed
Jones.
it. I didn't feel it was done. I believed it was true.
But, like, this is a classy British man doing...
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. By the way, I read recently that, that Schwarzenegger movie, The Sixth Day?
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger was nominated for Worst Actor twice for that movie.
There you go.
Oh, that's funny.
He played his character and the clone of his character, and so he got 2 nominations that year from the Razzies.
I didn't hate that movie. I just didn't.
It was, I remember.
He did Sixth Day and End of Days around the same time, so he did 2 Days movies.
Yeah, and that was when Schwarzenegger's career, like he was a blockbuster superstar, and then he started making movies that weren't doing so good.
Everything kind of stumbled after
Last Action Hero. Yeah, and I remember I didn't mind Sixth Day. One of the things I really liked about it was A, Michael Rooker, and B, the guns shot flame like as an homage to Logan's Run. I dug that. And there was a trashed 99 Volkswagen Beetle in the film. Like that was a new car, but they beat the crap out of it. And I remember thinking, like, that's something you don't see in a lot of movies. You don't see that attention to detail. It's always shiny and new. And here they are showing something that's just new now, and they're showing it as like an old car, and I kind of like respected the film for that. I haven't seen it since it was on VHS, so
it's fun to go back to RoboCop to look at the Ford Tauruses that the police force drives. Because those were futuristic at the time.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a doll in The Sixth Day that is absolutely terrifying? It's like his kid wants one of these popular dolls. It's like it's like a clone. It's like almost a clone, but it's like it's got, and at the time the effect was like this animatronic child's face, and it's freaking terrifying in the movie. It's not meant to, but there's like a very popular toy at the time. It's like this, look, she's my clone doll or something, and then the effect that they used was just nightmare.
Yeah.
You know what? I wanted to bring something up, and I'm so glad you mentioned that anachronistic thing, because I was hoping that we'd have a little extra time at the end of this. Have you guys ever seen the movie? I think it was originally called Spaceship, or it was called The Creature Wasn't Nice, and then it ended up being released called Naked Space, and it's an alien.
Yeah.
And it's Leslie Nielsen and Garrett Graham and Cindy Williams, and it's a terrible film. But the opening scene is like Garrett Graham piloting a spaceship, looking at porno mags. And you're just like, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to be doing in the future. Pawing through magazines.
Never going to change. Well, he's an antique collector, obviously.
Yeah.
Garrett Graham's a name that doesn't get thrown out enough. I've told you my love for that guy.
You and I share that, yeah.
Well, if you look at the design in Alien on the Nostromo, and there's the big battle between Ash and Sigourney. Oops, sorry about that.
No problem.
There's the big battle between Ash and Sigourney Weaver, and in his space there's a bunch of centerfolds posted on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the magazine he grabs is a magazine. I can't remember what kind of magazine it is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a porno mag that he tries to ram down her face.
Well, Blade Runner, those newsstands, the Omni magazine, all those magazines, there were some porno mags there, and we made it to 2019, and they're still out there. So maybe The Creature Wasn't Nice got it right. We'll see. We shall see.
I could not finish that movie.
David, did Starlog ever do a Saturn III super special, or was there a comic adaptation, or a Lego set? Or no, I'm kidding. But
I have the Hector Lego.
Yeah.
You have the Lego set. Were there any kind of products that hit at the time, or I know there were T-shirts, I think, right?
For Saturn.
There's probably iron-on transfers. Yeah, there probably is, because it's the cheapest thing you can make.
But the answer is not. The answer is not much. There really wasn't much at all. I think there was, at the time of the release of the film, there was some promotional materials that were handed out, but there was no merchandise. It was all marketing, and that's why it was plastered on all these magazines. Because you can look at the cover of Famous Monsters, Fangoria, Starlog. They all practically look the same, with Hector on there. Front and center. And, I think Starlog actually had Farrah and Kirk Douglas in that massive set, which was so massive, apparently, that the crew, when they first were sort of trying to maneuver through this massive set that took 2 sound stages at Shepperton, they'd get lost. And
that is true,
yeah. So, and it's. I think the aesthetic was there, the design was there, the promotion was there. The movie was not there.
Right, I love it. It had the promotion, the design. It just was missing a script, a cast. I think you're also forgetting about the promotional Playgirl spread that Kirk Douglas did for that.
Yes,
as well.
That's right.
That's the cover story.
Did he really do that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, in my dreams he did.
Yeah, I know you have every issue, so I just.
Yeah, no, he's not. Unless I'm missing one. But no, he did not. I don't think he did it.
There was a novelization, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be the only piece of merchandise that really was out there. Was the
Steve Gallagher wrote that one. For what it's worth.
Is he related to the Gallagher?
Alone in Space. The Horror Has Terror. Yeah, he's got a sledgehammer.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good.
Now a major motion picture starring Farrah Fawcett gets top billing over Kirk Douglas and Harvey Keitel.
Oh, yeah.
Shots fired.
He had to. So then the promotional patch that I have, or the iron-on thing, or the decal, whatever it is,
that's worth millions.
One of the only pieces of merchandise ever made for Saturn III. Well, there must have been remember in the back of Starlog when they had those mesh, those foam and mesh caps that they have, like the Nostromo cap.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They have Star Trek. Did they ever do one of those for Saturn III? Or like the
Nope.
logo? Nothing, huh?
No.
Wow.
They did Outland. I mean, like
They had
I think you'd get like a Con-Am 27 something. But yeah, it was always just a Nostromo, and there you go.
When you don't
And then
don't get Alan Dean Foster to do your novelization, something is wrong.
Something's wrong. Exactly.
Yeah, wow.
That's what Luke. That was the big meeting when the film bombed. Well, we think we know where we went wrong. The novelization. We didn't get Alan Dean Foster, and the fans were expecting that. I actually went to a comedy thing at a theater in L.A. a couple months ago, and the guy taking the tickets at front had a Nostromo cap, baseball cap on. You know, hipster L.A. I'm like, oh, this. So I thought maybe he doesn't even know what it is. And so I'm like, sweet Nostromo cap. He's like, hey, thanks, bro. I'm like, is that original or is it? He goes, yeah, it's vintage. I got it from a buddy who like collects stuff. I got it vintage. I'm like, okay, you're okay then, as long as you know what it is.
Hey, I remember when in Fletch, Chevy Chase is wearing a Nostromo cap.
Oh, that's right.
Is he?
Yeah. And I always remember feeling like looking around next to me, like, do you see that? You see Nostromo cap? Isn't that awesome? And no one, batted an eye. No one knew. So,
David.
We knew, David.
If I would have been there in the theater, I would have given you the thumbs up, like, fuck yeah.
Like, yeah, look at that.
If he wore that in Fletch Lives, I would have had to have looked around an empty theater. And, sorry.
I don't think I have
joke.
ever that he's wearing a Nostromo cap in that movie ever. That's amazing. Now I got to look for that.
I also, one last thing that we didn't talk about. We talked about the poster, but we didn't talk about the poster's tagline for Saturn III.
Is it Something Is Wrong on Saturn III?
Well, there's that, and everyone figured that out really quickly when they watched the movie. But on the poster, it says something underlined is watching, waiting, and wanting on Saturn III. So they're basically selling the lust.
Right
there.
And then in parentheses it said, and it's Kirk Douglas's ass.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That was the last tagline.
I remember Something Is Wrong on Saturn III was a Mystery Science Theater joke every time they showed like a spaceship or a moon base. Tom Servo would say that. And, that I know that better than I know the actual trailer or poster these days, obviously.
Well, I have to say there are a couple of the spaceship designs are really cool, and a couple are incredibly clunky. But they're with that scout ship that goes to make sure that they're okay, and they're like, everything's fine. And it's Hector talking, and then they leave. That's a great shot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great image, and it's all too quick.
Yeah.
But the design is very, this sort of like early Macquarie, or it feels. It feels. Oh gosh, what's the artist? You guys both know it. He did the Star Wars battle over the Death Star, where there are two Millennium Falcons. Berkeley,
yeah.
John Berkey.
John Berkey, yeah.
Yeah.
It feels sort of has sort of a Berkey quality to his designs, and it's very cool. So.
The cover of the Star Wars novel too, isn't that him, the same guy?
Yeah, John Berkey did that as well, and he did some King Kong stuff, '76, and anyway. But there's an aesthetic there that completely looks ridiculous, but there's also an aesthetic there that looks like there's a cool movie in there somewhere. But like when you see that giant vessel as the first thing you see with like this weird sort of warped radar dish. I just love how it takes 10 minutes for it to go over your head, because that was the obligatory shot after Star Wars, where everyone had to have a massive spaceship that took 10 minutes to go over your head to show the size and scope of that. And even Alien had that as well, with the Nostromo and the refinery that it was attached to.
So how everybody's talking about, I mean currently anyway, or recently, everyone's talking about the Snyder cut of Justice League, like release the Zack Snyder cut. There's another cut. It's longer,
I can't wait.
It's got all this stuff. And,
Brian won't shut up about that.
Yeah, no, I'm totally into that.
I would be totally into that. To be perfectly honest, I would love if they would release that. So, David, are you saying that you think there is whatever footage was left out of it, or if somebody got their hands on it and edited it differently, or tweaked some things, you think there's a much better film in there somewhere that could have been made, or do you think it's like it wouldn't have made much of a difference and it was still going to be what it was going to be? And
no, Jason, I do not.
By the way, I just tried to Google one of the spaceships while we were talking. There's an amazing website called Saturn3makingof.com that we should all visit after and maybe do a second episode, because this guy's
what's that site about? What's it about?
I don't know. It's a mystery, but it is just full. Like this, somebody has spent their adult life obsessing over this film, like we have.
See, and you think there's no Uber fans out there? There you go.
Here he is, and yeah, there's that really cool. The ship is called Survey 19. And really, really interesting that somebody has talked about all the deleted scenes here, and I'm probably not going to sleep tonight. Oh yeah, that is totally Jerry Anderson's Skydiver in that film. I want to bring up the ending of the movie, which has Farrah Fawcett's character surviving after Kirk Douglas's character sacrifices himself to Hector. Mm-hmm. It is not a feel-good ending. She's going to Earth, and it has like a really dreary, like Earth looks terrible, and she's staring out at it like kind of
the music gets more and more sinister as she gets closer to Earth, and then roll credits, and you keep on thinking, wait, is there some stinger coming that she's carrying a virus, or Hector's on the ship with her? The music is telling you something bad's going to happen.
Yeah,
and then
but she's never been to Earth.
That's what I thought the thing was to me, was that Douglas was aware of the Earth, and he knew how bad things were, and she'd never been there. And here she was. Doesn't she keep asking him questions throughout, like, do horses have 4 legs or whatever the hell she does? And asked him a bunch of questions and stuff, and I thought the thing was always like she gets there and she's like, "What a dump!"
Yeah.
Well, according to Harvey Keitel, dogs are for eating.
Oh yeah,
right. That's what he says, because he's handling the dog and just like holds it up and checks its sex and he's being really rough with it, and I guess no pun intended, but it's one of those things where he says, "Well, dogs are for eating." And she's like, "Well, not here."
Now, you remember that time I was at Comic-Con and I texted you, Brian, and I saw that guy with a T-shirt that had the kid from the Lost Boys hook, and it said Bangarang on it?
Yeah, I do remember that.
I'd love to see a guy with a Harvey Keitel T-shirt with the phrase "Dogs are for eating" walking around Comic-Con.
If you check my Redbubble store, it'll be available shortly.
That's a T-shirt right there. That's a secret handshake. Somebody finds that guy from across the floor at Comic-Con. Hey, Saturn 3 fan, huh? Yeah, me too.
I got a feeling I could go to China with Saturn 3 merchandise and no one would sue me.
There's another thing. It's funny. I'm just thinking about. They all have those weird little tattoos on their faces, on their temple, right?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of this element where it seems like there's just more to the story that we never fully got, that might have been in an earlier draft, and it just got written over and just never got either fleshed out or they just.
But that was kind of the way with like 70s and 80s sci-fi. There was a lot of stuff, like you look at Logan's Run, they do not explain a lot of things going on in the film. You look at Zardoz, obviously there's way more that needs to be explained, and it's almost like they just want you to assume you know what's going on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like the kids in Cathedral with the muscle in Logan's Run, that is not explained to the audience. I know what it is because I've read the book.
There is not enough film in the world to explain Zardoz, to finish that thing and put more of it that will make more sense ever. That would be a week-long miniseries.
I am remaking it with Jack Black, and
there we go.
Yeah.
So is Saturn 3, when you see when it's, let's say someone didn't really know what Zardoz is, and you kind of explain like, well, let me explain what it is, and here's the trailer, and then they look at what. What you explained was crazy, but I didn't think it was going to be that. Do you think is Saturn 3 Zardoz has to be more as a concept and as a how did this happen thing. Zardoz has to be more insane than Saturn III, right? It's not in that realm of what the F, how did this happen kind of thing. Is it on the same level as Zardoz?
Saturn III is not. It's not a train wreck. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. I keep watching Saturn III expecting it to work.
Yes, and Brian, and you and I both seem to want to come back to this movie over.
It'll be good this time. Yeah.
Well, let's but Brian.
Yeah, that's the definition of insanity. What's the definition of insanity? Going back to Saturn III again and again and again, expecting it to be good.
Yes, that's exactly it. Expecting a different result.
Space pirates over and over again.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. It's not a train wreck. It's not, and neither is Zardoz. To be honest with you, I mean, Zardoz is. I mean, I just came across the trailer the other day again. I was like, oh my God, this is what people must have thought sitting in the theater. Connery was James Bond. Period. He'd done stuff in between, but when that thing shows up in you're going, what the? I don't know who that was aimed at or what it was going to be or whatever. Why Connery signed the whole thing is a fascinating story that I would love to hear someday. But I think that Saturn III is also like, on paper you go, I don't think this is going to work. Maybe the casting would have been okay and it all would have been okay if the script had been more, punched up or been more interesting or moved along or there'd been more characters or, was trying to say something more profound or, I don't know what. As a pitch, there's nothing to it, really.
I think in a different director's hands, this could have been a better film because because good or bad or clunky or McClunky, the production design is there. It's clearly trying to be alien and it's trying to be different, but the production design is there. The money is there. The actors are there. The concept is there. But it's not capably handled, and it is a bunch of ideas and vignettes, and it does just not coherent. And obviously, you can blame the script a lot with why this is a problematic film. But I think you could take any film that is not necessarily the sum of its parts and have a more capable director to create something more compelling. And I think that's when you have the guy who did Singing in the Rain directing this film, it's not going to work.
Yeah, there's no way to come at that and not think that this was either a favor, somebody called him, or it was like, I needed to work. I gotta, because it doesn't fit in with anything really in his CV kind of.
I mean, there's no gravity in this movie. They're just like walking around on the Saturn set, and they didn't even bother to even try to pretend to do a slow-mo bounce.
Well, I mean, when I mean gravity, I mean you don't give a shit about any of these people. There isn't. You don't care. There's no suspense. I find
there's no real big backstory about what they're doing there. It was like they were doing something there that was leading to we're going to clone humans, or we're doing stuff like some kind of profound. It's just kind of it could be an episode of a TV series. This guy, the stranger shows up on the ship, and all hell breaks loose and the robot goes nuts. But I don't know how you even pitch this thing. There's two people on a space station are terrorized by a third guy who's got to kill a robot, and
that sounds like the pitch meeting.
I think what this comes down to, if you want to sort of distill it into, would you recommend this or not, or why would you recommend this, or why would we watch this? I would not recommend this to anyone who doesn't have a morbid curiosity of how this comes together. But as a straightforward film, I would tell anyone to steer clear because it's not very good. But this to me represents a certain time. Here's the thing. I'm going to do a semi-plug for my upcoming 80s sci-fi.
Oh, please do, because I want to know if it's going to be in there or not.
Saturn III will most definitely be in there. And the thing is, I'm going to give equal importance for Empire Strikes Back, and Saturn III will be of equal standing because of this reason. The thing is, this movie is comfort food for a variety of reasons. And whether it's because you love to hang out and leaf through Starlog magazine and Famous Monsters and, Fangoria, and it promised something that your brain was hoping would be the most amazing thing in the world. The thing is, when you watch it, it brings you back to that mindset. This is macaroni and cheese movie making, and
Right.
and it's obviously incredibly easy to dismiss this as schlock and something that doesn't work. I mean, you can't argue with that. But, a counterbalance to that is that this meant something to a lot of people at a certain time. And what I've learned is that no matter what the movie is, but especially the schlockier the movie it is, there are people like Brian and myself who will die on Saturn III Hill for a variety of reasons that would make sense to no one else but us. And it's kind of for the reasons that we've explained why we're curious or why we like this film. And so I just wanted to be able to recognize the importance that if this meant something to you at a certain time in your life, either when it came out or when you saw it on TV or VHS, that's why this movie is important. And that's why I think it's interesting to sort of take a closer look.
I think you're right. I think it's one of those where if it was someone that's not a big movie person or like, hey, I'm looking for something fun to watch for the weekend, any recommendations? But if you're talking to somebody who's curious about this stuff and they're fascinated by, finally discovering, the hidden with Kyle MacLachlan and Michael, what's his name, Michael Nouri. You like, oh, you know what? Or anytime it's like a conversation about strange casting, or did you know they made a movie with the guy who, it's the kind of thing you can pull out and go, okay, but do you know about Saturn III? Oh, you got to see that.
Yeah.
I think to me that taking all this stuff in is, there's merits to stuff and there's not, and you can judge it any which way you want. But the fascinating, it's there, it was made, you should see it and go, it's more knowledge to have. I would turn people on to this who were into sort of strange, how did that happen kind of, like a Zardoz. Like there's people that love Zardoz. But there's no two ways about it. You have to go, this is a strange movie, and it's extraordinary that the biggest box office man in the planet was in that movie. That's one of the things he chose to do right after this franchise, Saturn III is like the hottest TV star, pinup poster actress personality woman, a legend, in sci-fi, and, the screen legend in sci-fi. And you're like, well, let's see what happens. It's a fascinating story, I think. It's a very strange concoction, and I give it merit for that. Give it credit for that.
I'm happy it exists. I will say that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd rather be in a world that Saturn III with Kirk Douglas and Harvey Keitel exists than a world with James Caan and William Hurt was the bad guy or something.
Well, the poster is a memorable thing. The Starlog thing is a memorable thing to my childhood, and even though the film itself is kind of disappointing, it's all part of that backstory to my life, and so yeah, I don't hate it. I'm glad it exists. It's a spectacular failure, but it's Saturn III.
Even if you look at the colors, the color scheme and the overall aesthetic of this film, this is a movie that I can easily, if I want to do something else and have something on in the background,
yes,
I could happily put on Saturn III as my warm comfort blanket. It's comfort food. It's a comfort blanket.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I could just, because
I love it.
You don't need to pay attention. You could look up every now and then and see, Farrah and Kirk either romping or running, and it's just fun. And you don't need to pay attention, but you could look up every now and then and absorb it and appreciate what it meant to you.
Yeah.
And it feels fun.
I would also tell people, you don't need to see Saturn I or Saturn II.
No, yes. You'll be completely caught up. Yeah, you bring up a good point, David. My wife falls asleep to The Office every night, like to the point where that piano themed to the show just is like a Pavlovian response for her. She'll just start dozing. It's familiar. She likes it. It's friendly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have to point out what Jason's making a joke based on a story I told him recently about back in the schoolyard when I was a kid and Close Encounters came out. And I had this conversation. We were all sitting around the circle saying, which is better, Star Wars or Close Encounters? And I loved both movies, and I loved Star Wars. But I decided just to champion Close Encounters because it was the underdog in that conversation.
Oh, yeah, it's going to lose.
And this one kid, he just said, yeah, he always just wanted to one-up you, whether or not it was true or not. And he said to me, well, David, Close Encounters was the third kind was pretty good, but I got to say, Close Encounters is the second kind. That was better. and I said, Larry, there was no Close Encounters of the second kind. He's like, yeah, there was. There are three of them. I saw the second. This is the third movie. I said, no, there wasn't. He's like, yeah, I saw them all. Of course there are. And he stood by it because there was no way to prove otherwise. Because
that pre-Google bullshit. I got into fist fights over that. That should be a whole podcast.
Yeah.
You know what though? You know what? That guy is running a studio right now.
Yeah.
So joke's on him. Okay, that guy who said there were two more. That is the greatest. I love that. I love that guy. I mean, talk about a hill to die on. Like, yeah, Close Encounters of the second kind. Not, it's better. It's like
actually,
it's such a kid thing. It's so funny.
Yeah.
But it's kind of brilliant at the same time. I love it.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think the first Saturn was good. Saturn 2 was better. By the time they got to Saturn 3, they ran out of ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they did wrap everything up really well.
Yeah, well, they all died, didn't they? Something like that.
Yeah.
On that note,
Saturn 2 had Michael Douglas. It was great.
One more question for Brian. Brian?
Yes?
Was there a commercially available poster of Farrah Fawcett from Logan's Run with the logo like in the bottom of the poster? Was that a thing that was available?
All of the Logan's Run merchandise that was commercially available was a backdoor to sell Farrah merchandise. So like
Careful.
you had a towel, yeah. You had a towel that had the little tiny Logan's Run logo and had a picture of Farrah. There was a mug. There was a series of cups. There was T-shirts.
Poster,
yeah, and that is why, famously, Mego Corporation grabbed the rights to the Logan's Run movie, is because they had invested all that money in a Farrah doll, and they didn't want somebody to go, well, this is... Because, if you recall at the time, Hasbro had grabbed Charlie's Angels, and were releasing a Farrah doll there, and they were saying, this is Charlie's Angels, so Mego grabbed Logan's Run just on principle. And yeah, that absolutely happened.
I wish there was I still want a Sandman Mego action figure.
I am always working on that sort of stuff.
I want the prop gun is what I want. I want it to work. I want it to actually shoot people. No, I'm kidding. That's what I thought. I figured, well, at least Saturn 3 would have had, at least they would have taken her and put her on a poster to sell at Spencer's or, Woolworths or something maybe, but didn't even do that, huh?
I guess not.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't remember. I don't have a Farrah thing, so I'd never really paid attention. But I Google eBay all the time, or I go through eBay all the time, and I don't think I've ever seen a commercially available Saturn 3 Farrah poster, which is surprising, to be honest with you.
Yeah, at the very least. Well, there you go. I would say that's probably more than anyone listening has ever learned about Saturn 3. Possibly. I could be wrong. Let us know when this gets posted. I learned some stuff. I think I'm a better person because of this podcast, so hope everyone had a good time.
That's right, and plus we got to talk about your Hunter from the Future.
Not enough. That'll be our next episode.
Next episode, you can find the Blu-ray.
I find it. It's 10 feet away from me. So, yeah, no, this was a joy, guys. I really appreciate doing this.
Well, I always appreciate being invited on because it's we might as well have drinks in front of us, and we could talk about nonsense for hours and geek out.
Do. I was going to say, speak for yourself, pal. I've got a drink in front of me. But we should also add that in a way, as best we could, even though we've talked about his backside a lot, this was kind of a tribute to Kirk Douglas in honor of his recent passing at 103 years old. So that's kind of partly we had talked about it for a while. But
it was the catalyst for me. That's what brought it to my attention. Yeah. You said, it's all on you, Hyler. What do you want to do?
I hope we showed enough respect for Kirk Douglas within the show, because I happen to like him, and Paths of Glory and 7 Days in May and Spartacus, and the fact that he broke the blacklist with Dalton Trumbo, yada, yada, yada. So I hope I didn't talk about his butt too much in the show, because it's a fine butt.
I don't think you talked about it enough.
We see a lot of it. That's all. It's a fine behind.
I'd like to throw in that I had one honor when I was working at Entertainment Tonight, and I got to sing Happy Birthday to Kirk Douglas on his 90th birthday.
Wow.
He was on the ET set, and we brought out a cake, and they said, come and go sing Happy Birthday to Kirk Douglas, and a bunch of us got around and on camera, and we all sang Happy Birthday to him, and it was an absolute. I knew at that moment it was quite a treat, and who knew that 13 more years would go by before we'd have to say goodbye to such a wonderful actor.
You get a chance to tell him how much you love Saturn III?
He punched me when I told him. No.
Speaking of Kirk, a little bit of trivia. Kirk Douglas's nude butt has a cleft in it, just like his chin.
Yes. That's funny. That's comedy.
So look for that. Yeah, look for that, everybody. On that note, thanks, everybody. Thank you guys for setting this up.
This was a blast. I really looked forward to this all day, so I'm really happy we did this.
Well, I've been looking forward to this for a year, and so I'm glad we finally knocked out a Saturn III episode.
And we got to have you back in less than a year to talk about another film from your upcoming documentary. I don't know what that is. I just want to throw that out there. Maybe it's
absolutely
Galaxina. Maybe it's Outland. I don't know, but I want to do this again real soon.
I would love to.
Are you doing the Hidden? Is the Hidden in your movie?
If it's 80s, if it's sci-fi, it's going to be in my movie. I'm doing everything.
Excellent. Hidden is an underrated gem. That's a great little underrated sci-fi gem. Kyle MacLachlan, Michael
Nuri. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Michael Nuri was TV's Dracula from Cliffhangers.
Yes,
that's right. And they never finished that damn cliffhanger.
They did.
Wait, no, that was the one that finished, but not the Susan Anton or the Space Cowboy one. Did that finish? I think they only finished
the Dracula one was actually not only finished but released as a TV movie later.
Yeah.
A TV movie I have to hunt down.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, he was also in, right afterwards, The Gangster Chronicles on NBC, I think, with Joe Penny and Brian Benben of Dream On fame.
And The Gangster Chronicles, that was the sequel to The Martian Chronicles, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it was. Darren McGavin played the mob boss.
Yeah. Rock Hudson just landed his spaceship right there.
All right, there you go. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome.
That was a blast.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah.
I definitely have to run. I truly, truly appreciate you guys making this happen and inviting me along. It's always a pleasure.
No, there was nobody I'd rather do this with.
Yeah, glad you could do it, man. That was great. Thank you, guys.
And Brian, I just have to say what I told you on social media, but I got to say your toy ventures really are awesome.
Thank you.
And I recognize that you are getting knocked around by morons saying just nasty things because they're dicks on social media. So please never take that to heart and keep on doing what you're doing, because things like the Tarzan thing and many others that you've done, I think you are doing a service, by doing these little pieces that have the research and the history of these items that are collectible now. And people will refer to these in the future because there will be nowhere else to go.
Thank you.
And so I think you're doing important work. I really do.
The one frustrating thing about it is sometimes you want to look up something and you find your own work. It's like, it's me talking about it.
On a daily basis, I think of something and I look for something, and I find everything from a catalog to a poster to a commercial, and it's got your damn logo plastered. So anyway, I really got to go.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, David.
See you
Thank
guys.
you very much,
Thank you.
man. Take care.
All right. Bye.
More hair on my chest. Yeah. So text me in the morning and let me know what your schedule is, and we'll make some time. No problem.
Really good. I got lots of time. I got an open schedule tomorrow. That's wonderful.
Awesome.
All right.
Man,
Thank you, my friend. That was a lot of fun.
Do it.
Really appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. Have fun.
Yeah, man.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.